much to Roy Bishop. We're ready for the question and answer session, and I think Roy Wiltshire's coming back to join us. Yep, great. Well, you've had a very interesting briefing, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I don't know if you agree with all our speakers. I don't know if you disagree with all our speakers. You may have your own viewpoint, and I'd be very interested to hear that, and I'm sure our delegates would as well. There are microphones again going around amongst you. Please, in this session, if you want to direct a particular question to one of our speakers, please don't be afraid to do so. So, any questions? There we are, gentlemen in the back.
Graham Day from Heathrow Airport. I'm with my colleague Les Freer. I've got a short plea and a short question. The plea is following Claire's announcement about 8% year-on-year reductions and possible implications for that for fire service response. If fire service response to an airport, for example, is one of the implications of those reductions, please keep the communication lines open between yourselves and your colleagues at airports. For two reasons. An airport fire service response is predicated on international regulation, and the second thing, a tangible, effective, safe response from the local authority fire and rescue service. So please keep those lines of communication open. I'm secretary on the Airport Operators Association, so I'll be making the same point to the aviation colleagues. I'm lucky enough to be a retired fire officer and a second chance in the aviation sector, so I can understand some of the implications and pressures that you all have now. And the second thing is a quick question to Andy. Aviation firefighters up and down the country are represented by Unite and Prospect. And is there any dialogue between the FBU and those two unions regarding, for example, the implications of national operational guidance? We certainly have adopted the NOG. We're both involved with NOG and have been for the last 2 years, so it's dear to our hearts, and our SOPs are rooted in national operational guidance. So is there any dialogue between yourself and the two unions that represent our guys?
That's a short answer, no. I mean, it raises an important point, is that it's clearly an issue. I won't waffle too much on it. It clearly is something that we need to look at. I'm glad you've identified it, but as I said at the beginning, very short answer, no. Something we need to look at.
Can I just extend that question from the chair and say why?
You can.
Is the answer still no?
No, it's simply a case of one of those things that as a union, I think either we've let drift or was never there. Something we need to address.
Okay,
Can
thank
I
you.
add to that?
Please do.
It is absolutely important that what you've raised in relation to liaison with local authorities around your borders. As a Surrey County Councillor with both Gatwick and Heathrow on our borders, we absolutely make sure that we do that. And when we refresh, and I think all fire authorities do, when we refresh our integrated risk management plans, part of it should be making sure that any aviation, so we've got small airports as well, airfields, it is all important, and it's part of the risk management in the profile. So I'm sure we have a duty under the Act to do that collaborative work, and certainly I certainly know that fire authorities, when we actually do that, we make sure that we liaise if there are any proposed changes that might affect the airports in our areas.
Thank you, Kate. Next question.
Thank you very much. I'm Glyn Lugeney, Director of Prevention and Protection from Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service. It's a question for Andy Darker, if I may, and it's just to note the inclusion of the marauding terrorist firearms attack in the National Operations guidance, which I think is great. But I think we ran out of time when I was interested in some of the points you were going to make around potential for co-responding and whether that's likely to be factored in. I know there's national negotiation around that issue, but I would be interested, Andy, if you could give us a response this afternoon on that point, please.
On the question of the MTFA work, is that we've just carried out a really informative session with a number of our Fire Brigade Union practitioners, our members that are doing the work within the teams in terms of the preparation they've had, and we'll be feeding that into discussions with the MTFA leads nationally, not least Simon and Dave Wharton, who's here. the ops guidance which is out there, I think needs to, and it touches on some of the themes that I was putting in the presentation. The question of ensuring that there is uniformity, that it's actually being applied in a way which is consistent. I think there are some gaps there. I'll leave it at that. But certainly we are progressing that. But I think in terms of whether it's MTFA or whether it's corresponding, they are new areas of work which have been introduced, corresponding now jointly, originally just by Fire and Rescue Services, but now jointly through the NJC. MTFA, frankly, as a result of pressure from DCLG and the response to that pressure. I can't moan now about the way that MTFA was introduced because, frankly, you won't see it on a slide, but the way that we as the NJC have introduced corresponding, frankly, is on the rush. Is that where the different projects, and they do differ widely across the fire and rescue services where they've been brought in, haven't actually been introduced as a way that we would consider and the way that we've been lecturing everyone over the years about the way that you would introduce a new area of work. It's done for the reasons that we know. The case for the fire and rescue service against what's going to be happening on November the 25th and beyond. But I think in answer to your question, again, with that bit of context I think it is clearly an example, both of them are clearly examples of the need for the Ops Guidance Programme, the need for the Ops Guidance Project, because these might be two new areas of work which are now being looked at and introduced service-wide, UK service-wide, which needs to be on a uniform basis. But I think it's only an example of future working for fire and rescue services. And I'll just finish, I know it's a long response, but just in terms of what Kay was saying about the health and social care, if you like, activities which we're moving into as a service. There are risks around that. It may not mean that you've got to carry a set on your back or carry loads of equipment with you, but in terms of risks both for the organisation, for the fire and rescue service, and to an extent for perhaps legal risks for the individual, there's a whole body of work that needs to be done there. Not saying we should shy away from it, but I do think, frankly, DCLG needs to wake up to their responsibilities in funding it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Des Pritchard. Perhaps links a bit to what Andy's just been saying, because Roy, I was really interested and quite excited by what you just put up there. And the issue is about risk appetite for the IFE, also the board, because what's been a problem in the past is perfection being the enemy of the good. I remember convening a meeting a few years ago of CFO, the IFE, fire sector and other parties about some sort of front of house portal so we could collate information. And because we tried to satisfy every single partner's desire and wish, it never got off the ground. So this bit about your push and pull, it's about taking a leap of faith. We haven't got everyone on board, but we've got as many people on board as possible. And actually, this is going to be better than what we've got. I think my caution is if you strive for perfection, then we'll be here in a year's time and you haven't got it off the ground. But if you're prepared to, actually, this is pretty good and it's much better than it currently is, do you know what, we'll go ahead. We haven't got every partner signed up. We haven't got MOUs with every external partner to pull in their information. So you haven't got all fire rescue services here, but we've got enough data here, we've got enough people here to be able to populate that machine you described, to be able to push information out. It's going to be really helpful. So it's just to say, well done to all of you, but I think that's a great idea. Don't let perfection get in the way of something that's going to really improve the service.
No, we recognise that, and as I said right at the beginning of my little piece, you have to understand that the project is being pushed hard and fast, with appropriately fast, not over fast, but it's very strictly managed for the deliverables. We have teams looking at those things, and I, like you and others, we've already entered the debate and said let's do what the art of the possible, and worry about the trimmings at the end. Yeah.
Gentleman here, final question.
Hi, thanks. Nick Collins, Head of the National Operational Guidance Programme, so this is hardly a surprising question I'm about to ask. I'd like to hear from each member of the panel, if we can, what is the one thing you think we ought to deliver for the future? What should we change? What should we shape? What should we improve? Looking to the next 2 years and beyond 2018, what would you personally think our priority should be?
I think those things that we've all talked about and that Des has talked about is that we must learn from past activities and mistakes, and that we have to have, in my particular, I'm answering from my particular part of the project, but that we must learn from past activities and mistakes and ensure that we feed those in properly, and there's a visible loop for improvement of performance between what we do and what we want to do in the future.
I would say you need a clear communications plan which enables you to disseminate information not only to obviously the service, the operational personnel, but to elected members too. We need to understand what's going on, we need to know how it can affect performance or otherwise, and so local authorities and the fire authorities are very clear in how they then can question the fire officers in relation to performance and whether or not they're implementing any of things, because there will be people, as you said, who are not on board yet, and we need to know who those are, and the communication is absolutely essential for delivery of any programme. We all know this in other fields as well. Unless you've got a clear communication plan right at the start, you're not going to get the message out to the people you need to get the message to.
Andy.
I was glad you started at the end, so I had time to think about what my answer would be, but I haven't come up with a good one. Actually, I've got to say, loads of the right to do it. I've got to agree with Roy there. I do think the question of battles is I do think the question of learning is going to be the key one. I think it has been the key one which has been missing until now. I do think there is a problem with it because much earlier in the day, Des raised the issue of the fact that we wait an awful long time for the opportunity or the ability to analyse and put the information out. Let's face it, Dowrow Road, that information is almost out fully. That was 2009. 4 years later, almost the day, Oldham Street. That's 2 years ago. That's 2 years ago. Over 2 years ago, we still haven't had information out there. I think there are structural problems which are going to be able to prevent, which will prevent us doing that work. On the question of accident investigations, there are structural things which aren't within the gift of the IFE or the Ops Guidance Programme Board. They need to be addressed. Not all the lessons, in fact most of the lessons aren't actually as a result of fatal accident investigations. I think it is the most important one, and I do think there is a link, very much a link to how guidance, more importantly how practice is being operated within fire and rescue services. I think it is the key one. Got to agree with Roy on that. That for us is probably the biggest priority, alongside the work that's been done, and is programmed in so far.
Right. Okay.
You get the chance to tell us every month, of course.
Yeah, and the downside of being this end is you can't repeat yourself. Now, I think I'd sum it up in legacy, very similar to the Jessup programme, which is now Jessup in principles. It's not something that's 2 or 3 years programme done, finished, we can move on. We need something that's sustainable, something that we don't go back to no national policy on guidance, and make sure that it's fully embedded in all the services and all the partners that we work with.